Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to show you how to supercharge your projects and level up your abilities of using your router to flush trim your solid wood edge banding so that all of your projects look like they are made from solid wood completely by hiding all of those horrible MDF and plywood edges. Edge banding is glued on. I deliberately made it slightly thicker than the rest of the board so that I can now flush that up rather than all the hassle of trying to line it up perfectly when it gets glued up. So I'm going to use my router on a jig. You can make your own jigs up like this. I might even do a video on making a specific flushing jig. I'm also using a special 3-flute cutter, but you can actually use a normal 2-flute straight cutter on this. It just gives you a slightly better, I think, result, and it's a bit quicker as well. But you don't need loads of super special kit. Okay, so now all my edge banding is glued on. I've got 4 components that need flushed, and there's a slight lip of probably between 1 and 2 mil on both sides of all 4 pieces. Need to now flush that up and basically thickness these pieces of edge banding to the same as the rest of the board. I have my router mounted on a flat base. It's an auxiliary base. That allows me to reference off a flat surface, and I've got installed in the router a 3-flute shear cutting, bottom cutting router bit. Now, you can use a normal 2-flute straight bit on here, but you'll notice on the very corners there's a curve. So it doesn't cut a square shoulder, it actually cuts a slight curve, and you'll see that when it's cutting. There's 3 cutting knives on this cutter, which means it's cutting 50% quicker than a normal 2-flute bit. And also, as these turn, you'll see they've got a slight angle to them, so it shears the fibres rather than kind of beats them out with as would a normal 2-flute cutter. Now, because I need to reference off a lower surface than the edge banding, what I need to do is install a second part to my jig, which is this piece. It just fits in here and tightens down like so. This is now my referencing surface, and I've got this step and cut out so that the router bit can be flush to where I'm cutting. Now, you can make these jigs quite easily, either with 2 plates or with a rebate on a plate. Sometimes you'll see a bearing on here which you can reference off the outer edge, but because my edge banding is thicker than the distance between where the cutout is on this shoulder and the edge of the bearing, and I haven't got a smaller bearing, I've actually taken that off completely. So I can reference off the main surface up to the lip, and then I can trim that off. Lower my cutter down, so now the bottom of these flutes here is in line with this surface, so that when the surface gets cut, it ends up being flush. I can look down the line, make sure I'm happy with where that's going to be. I'll lower this stop post, so if anything happens and I accidentally release this, then it will stay, or it'll go back to the same position, which is where I want it. You can also use a fine height adjuster to dial it in, but I've not got it fitted on this at the moment. Okay, all it needs to do now is connect the extractor to the router, plug the router in, and away we go. So you can see just from the first pass, obviously I've got to do this in stages. The first half of this edge banding is now flush with the original board, maybe a hair over. The quick sand will make that super job. I'll flip it over, do the other side. The secret with this method is to keep the base of your jig flat in contact with your workpiece. What I want to do is I want to show you this end on here. If I show you that, can you see how it's a little bit dodgy right on the end there? This has happened because I let not intentionally admittedly, if you aren't referencing the base of the jig flush to the surface, then you're going to get these undulations, and if it falls off, then you're going to get quite a serious dig in there, which can happen more on the outside edge, which obviously you want to avoid. Obviously, the bigger the workpiece, the more you can get on there. Obviously, this is a thinner one, so you just need to be a bit more careful. And the other thing, so you don't get these shadow lines, is don't try and take too much off at one time, because you end up then referencing the jig off the previous piece, which then puts the jig at an angle, which means you trim at an angle, but you also get these little shoulder lines, which are going to take forever to sand out. So take it steady. If you want to see a video of this entire build, then I'll put a link somewhere where you can go and watch